Yes, you know the scene. Fred Flintstone slides down the back of his brontosaurus crane at the quarry. He yells, "Yabba dabba doo," hops into his foot-powered car, and heads home to Wilma, Pebbles, and his pet dinosaur, Dino. It's an image burned into our collective memory. It's simple, it's funny, and it's the bedrock of one of the most famous cartoons ever made. But it also raises a question, one that might have tickled the back of your mind even as a kid. Is any of this real? Is everything you saw in the Flintstones a lie? The short answer is yes. A resounding, absolute, scientifically certain yes. The world of Bedrock is a complete fabrication. But that's not a very interesting answer. The interesting part is digging into why it's a lie. How far off was it? What was the world really like when our earliest ancestors were walking the earth? Looking at the Flintstones through the lens of evolution and anthropology isn't about ruining a beloved cartoon. It's about using a fun, familiar cartoon to understand the incredible, and frankly, much stranger, true story of our own origins. The show got almost everything wrong, but it did so in a way that perfectly mirrored the era in which it was made. It wasn't trying to be a documentary, it was a sitcom about a 1960s suburban American family, just dressed up in animal skins. The jokes, the family dynamics, the social life, it was all a parody of its time. The prehistoric setting was just a gimmick, and by picking apart that gimmick, we can see just how far we've come, both in our scientific understanding and in our society. Let's start with the biggest, most obvious inaccuracy, the one that makes paleontologists everywhere sigh. Humans and dinosaurs did not live at the same time. Not even close. This isn't a matter of a few thousand years or a fuzzy timeline. It's a gap of about 65 million years. To put that number in perspective, let's try to visualize it. If the entire history of Earth, from its formation to today, were a 24-hour clock, modern humans would appear in the last second before midnight. The dinosaurs would have disappeared around 10:40 p.m. We missed them by more than an hour on this cosmic clock. The last of the non-avian dinosaurs, creatures like Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops, died out at the end of the Cretaceous period. This was due to a cataclysmic event, most likely a massive asteroid impact in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact threw so much dust and debris into the atmosphere that it blocked out the sun, causing a global winter that led to the collapse of ecosystems and the extinction of roughly 75% of all species on the planet. This event cleared the way for a new group of animals to rise, the mammals. For millions of years, while dinosaurs roamed the earth, mammals were mostly small, nocturnal creatures, scurrying around in the undergrowth, trying not to get stepped on. With the giant reptiles gone, they could finally diversify and grow. Over the next 65 million years, these mammals evolved into the vast array of creatures we see today, from whales to bats to us. The first recognizable human ancestors, the hominins, didn't appear until about 6 or 7 million years ago in Africa. The genus Homo, to which we belong, emerged around 2.5 million years ago, and our own species, Homo sapiens, is only about 300,000 years old. So Fred Flintstone and his family were separated from the T-Rex by a chasm of time more than 200 times longer than the entire existence of our species. There is no fossil evidence, not a single bone, that shows a human and a non-avian dinosaur coexisting. They are in completely different chapters of Earth's history book. So if Fred didn't have a brontosaurus crane at the Slate Rock and Gravel Company, what kind of animals were actually around during the Stone Age? The world our ancestors inhabited was filled with its own incredible beasts, creatures that were, in their own way, just as spectacular as dinosaurs. This was the Pleistocene epoch, often called the Ice Age. It was a world of giant mammals, the megafauna. Instead of a brontosaurus, you might have seen a woolly mammoth. These massive, hairy elephants were a very real part of the Stone Age landscape. Early humans definitely interacted with them. They hunted them for food, used their bones and tusks to build shelters and tools, and even painted their images on cave walls. Instead of a saber-toothed dinosaur like Dino, you might have encountered a saber-toothed cat like Smilodon. These predators had massive canine teeth and were formidable hunters. There were also giant ground sloths, some as big as elephants. There were cave bears, woolly rhinos, and enormous deer with sprawling antlers. It was a world populated by giants, but they were giant mammals, not giant reptiles. Our ancestors had to survive in this world. They were not the top of the food chain from the start. They were hunters, but they were also the hunted. Life was a constant struggle for survival against predators and the elements. It was nothing like the comfortable suburban life of Bedrock. The animals were not pets or convenient appliances. they were food or they were a threat. This brings us to the second major lie of the Flintstones, the animal-powered technology. It's one of the show's most charming and inventive running gags. A woolly mammoth's trunk serves as a vacuum cleaner or a kitchen sink spray. A bird with a sharp beak acts as a record player needle. An octopus washes the dishes. A small dinosaur acts as a garbage disposal. It's clever and funny, but it's pure fantasy, and for several reasons. First, there's the issue of domestication. The process of taming a wild animal and breeding it over generations to serve a human purpose is a relatively recent development in human history. The first animal we know for sure that humans domesticated was the dog, likely from a wolf ancestor somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000 years ago. This was a long, slow process of building a partnership. It wasn't just a matter of grabbing a wild animal and telling it what to do. Other farm animals like cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs were domesticated much later, around 10,000 years ago, coinciding with the advent of agriculture. The idea that Stone Age people had a whole suite of perfectly trained, obedient wild animals to perform complex household tasks is completely backward. They were still in the process of figuring out their relationship with just one species, the dog. Second, there's the simple reality of animal behavior. An octopus is an incredibly intelligent and famously skilled escape artist. The idea that it would sit patiently under a sink and scrub plates is absurd. It would be out of there in seconds. A bird isn't going to sit still and let you drag its beak across a stone record. Most wild animals, when captured, are driven by fear and instinct. They would not perform repetitive, mechanical tasks on command. The show treats animals as simple, pre-programmed machines. But real animals are complex living beings. The entire concept of Bedrock's technology relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of biology and animal intelligence. So, what technology did real Stone Age people have? The name of the era gives you a clue stone. The defining technology of the Paleolithic, the Old Stone Age, was the creation of tools from stone, bone, and wood. This was not a simple or primitive skill, it was a craft honed over millions of years. Early hominins, like Homo habilis, created simple stone choppers, what we call Oldowan tools. Later, species like Homo erectus developed the Acheulean hand axe, a much more sophisticated, symmetrical, and versatile tool. It could be used for butchering animals, digging for roots, and shaping wood. Our own species, Homo sapiens, and our close relatives like the Neanderthals, developed even more advanced techniques. They could create specialized tools like spear points, scrapers, for cleaning hides and blades. This technology, known as flint knapping, is incredibly difficult. It requires a deep understanding of the properties of stone, precision, and a lot of practice. A skilled flint napper could create a razor-sharp edge that, in some cases, is even sharper than modern surgical steel. Their technology was all about survival. Spears for hunting, knives for cutting meat. Scrapers for preparing animal hides for clothing or shelter. They mastered the use of fire, which was a revolutionary technology. It provided warmth, protection from predators, a way to cook food, making it easier to digest and safer to eat, and a social focal point. Fire, not a dinosaur-powered lawnmower, was the transformative technology of the Stone Age. Everything was made by hand, from natural materials. There were no factories, no mass production, no complex machinery. Life was a direct, hands-on engagement with the natural world. This leads us to the technology of Bedrock's most iconic invention, the car. Fred's foot-powered vehicle with its stone rollers and wooden frame is a marvel of cartoon engineering. But it's a complete anachronism. The most crucial component of a car, the wheel, was not invented during the Stone Age. The invention of the wheel is credited to the civilizations of Mesopotamia around 3,500 BC during the Bronze Age. And even then, it wasn't initially used for transportation. The first wheels were likely potter's wheels. The use of wheels on carts came a bit later, so the Stone Age was by definition a pre-wheel era. Everything was carried or dragged. Even if they had invented the wheel, a car like Fred's would be wildly impractical. Imagine the sheer weight of two massive stone rollers. The amount of friction and the force required to get them moving and to keep them moving would be immense. Running on the ground would be far more efficient. The car is another example of the show's core formula: take a 1960s suburban convenience and create a prehistoric version of it. They wanted Fred to be able to drive to work, so they invented a Stone Age car, ignoring the fact that neither the wheel nor the concept of commuting to a 9-to-5 job existed. And that brings us to maybe the biggest and most pervasive lie of all the society of Bedrock. The Flintstones and the Rubbles live in a tidy little suburb. They have single-family homes with modern floor plans. Fred has a steady job at the quarry. Wilma and Betty are homemakers who shop, gossip, and manage the household. The men belong to a social club, the Loyal Order of Water Buffaloes. They go bowling. They go on vacation to Acapulco. They celebrate Christmas. They use money clams. They have a police force and a fire department. In every meaningful way, they are a typical middle-class American family from the mid-20th century. The reality of Stone Age society was profoundly different. For the vast majority of the Paleolithic era, humans were hunter-gatherers. They did not live in settled towns like Bedrock. They were nomadic or semi-nomadic, living in small mobile bands, likely consisting of a few related families. Their lives were structured around the seasons and the movement of the animals they hunted. They would have moved from place to place to find food and resources. Their shelters were not permanent stone houses. They were temporary structures like tents made of animal hides stretched over mammoth bones, or they were natural formations like caves and rock shelters. The idea of a single nuclear family living in isolation from everyone else is a very modern concept. Hunter-gatherer societies are typically much more communal. Child rearing, food gathering, and other essential tasks would have been shared among the group. Your survival depended on cooperation. There was no concept of a 9-to-5 job. Everyone, men and women, had a role in the daily task of finding enough to eat. Men may have focused more on hunting large game, while women likely focused on gathering plant foods, which often made up the bulk of the diet. But these roles were flexible and complementary. The idea of a homemaker who stays home all day while the breadwinner goes to work is a product of agricultural and industrial societies. Their social lives were not about bowling alleys and lodges. They were likely centered around the campfire, sharing stories, planning hunts, and performing rituals. We have evidence of their rich symbolic life in the form of stunning cave paintings like those found at Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain. These paintings depict animals with incredible skill and artistry. They suggest a complex worldview, a sense of spirituality, and a deep connection to the natural world. They also created small sculptures, like the famous Venus figurines, and personal adornments like beads made from shells and animal teeth. This was their culture. It was deep, meaningful, and completely alien to the suburban social climbing and consumerism of Bedrock. Even the way they speak is a lie. Fred, Barney, Wilma, and Betty speak fluent, colloquial 1960s American English. They use slang, they tell jokes, and they have complex conversations. While we don't know exactly what language our Stone Age ancestors spoke, or even precisely when complex language evolved, we know it wasn't modern English. The evolution of language is a complex topic, but it's one of the key things that makes us human. The ability to communicate complex, abstract ideas allowed for better cooperation, planning, and the transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next. The sounds they made and the structures of their sentences would be completely unrecognizable to us today. The language itself has evolved dramatically over thousands of years. Modern English is just one twig on a vast, ancient tree of languages. So if the Flintstones gets everything wrong, and the timeline, the animals, the technology, the society, the language, why do we still love it? Why does it endure? The reason is that its goal was never to be accurate. It was to be relatable. The creators, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, were not trying to make an educational program about prehistory. They were creating a primetime animated sitcom, the first of its kind, to appeal to adult audiences. They took the successful formula of the live-action sitcom, The Honeymooners, about two working-class couples in New York, and simply transplanted it into a comically absurd setting. Fred Flintstone is Ralph Cramden. Barney Rubble is Ed Norton. They have the same get-rich-quick schemes, the same arguments with their wives, the same everyday problems. They worry about their jobs, their money, and their neighbors. The genius of the show is in that contrast. The setting is prehistoric, but the problems are modern. Fred getting stuck in a traffic jam of foot-powered cars is funny because we've all been stuck in traffic. Wilma overspending on a new leopard skin dress is funny because it taps into familiar marital tropes about money. The anachronism isn't a mistake, it's the entire point of the joke. By placing modern anxieties in a primitive world, the show makes them seem universal and silly. It's a parody of modern life, not a depiction of ancient life. Does this constant popular depiction of humans and dinosaurs living together cause any harm? For the most part, probably not. Most people understand that cartoons are not reality. However, it does contribute to a widespread public misconception. The image of a caveman riding a dinosaur is so ingrained in pop culture that it can be a genuine source of confusion. It muddles the timeline of life on Earth and trivializes the vast, incredible story of evolution. It replaces the real fascinating world of Pleistocene, the world of mammoths, ice sheets, and the incredible resilience of our ancestors, with a simplistic and silly caricature. The real Stone Age was a period of immense hardship, but also of incredible innovation and creativity. Our ancestors were not the bumbling, simple-minded brutes of popular imagination. They were intelligent, adaptable, and resourceful. They survived ice ages, they spread across the entire globe, from Africa to Australia to the Americas. They developed sophisticated tools, created powerful art, and laid the social and cognitive foundations for everything that was to come. They were the original pioneers. Their story is far more compelling than Fred Flintstones. So, is everything you saw in the Flintstones a lie? Yes. The dinosaurs are wrong. The pets are wrong. The cars are wrong. The houses are wrong. The jobs are wrong. The entire social fabric of Bedrock is a fantasy. But the lie is a charming and clever one. It gave us a classic piece of television that has entertained generations, and perhaps, in its own strange way, it can serve a purpose. It can be a starting point. When a child asks if people really kept dinosaurs as pets, it's an opportunity to talk about what the world was really like. It's a chance to explain the immense timeline of evolution, to describe the real megafauna of the Ice Age, and to talk about the ingenuity of our ancestors who survived in that world. The Flintstones presents a world that never was, a comfortable modern life plopped down in a past that didn't exist. The truth is much messier, much more difficult, and infinitely more interesting. The real story of the Stone Age isn't about Yabba Dabba Doo, it's the story of us. It's the epic tale of survival, innovation, and the dawn of human consciousness on a wild and challenging planet. That's a story far grander than anything that ever happened in the town of Bedrock.